The snow lay thick across the forests of Eastern Europe, a silent, frozen battlefield where death moved as quietly as the wind. Every branch, every fallen log, every shadow could be hiding a life or death choice. It was here, in the harshest reaches of the Eastern Front, that one woman would carve her name into history in a way that seemed almost impossible. Her story wasn't just about skill, it was about fearlessness, cunning, and a mind that could turn the chaos of war into a deadly advantage. Her name was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, though most of the soldiers she hunted would never live long enough to remember it. Born into a world that didn't expect women to wield rifles with precision, Lyudmila was different from the start. Even as a young girl, she showed a relentless focus, a patience for waiting, and an uncanny ability to observe details that others overlooked. She was quiet, unassuming, the kind of person who could blend into a crowd, or in her case, into a snowy forest without being noticed. But underneath that calm exterior was a mind that could think 3 steps ahead of anyone, soldier or officer alike. Lyudmila grew up in Kiev, a city that would soon be drawn into the horrors of World War II. She was a student when the war erupted, but the news of advancing German forces didn't just scare her, it ignited something inside her. She didn't want to hide or wait for rescue, she wanted to fight. Against the backdrop of occupation, destruction, and fear, she made a choice that would change everything. She would become a sniper. At first, it wasn't easy. Women weren't widely accepted in combat roles. Some of her male comrades doubted her abilities, while officers questioned if she could handle the pressures of frontline fighting. But Lyudmila wasn't deterred. She trained relentlessly, honing her marksmanship to a level that was already exceptional. Her instructors quickly realized that this wasn't just another soldier, they were witnessing a natural predator in human form, calm under pressure, precise in every movement, and almost eerily patient. She quickly proved herself. Her first kills were not dramatic. They were measured, almost quiet, as if testing herself as much as the enemy. She learned to read the battlefield in ways that few could, understanding how a shadow could give away a position, how the smallest sound could reveal an ambush. And soon, she was unstoppable. Her name began to spread quietly through the ranks, whispered among soldiers with both admiration and disbelief. How could one woman, in the middle of a war where thousands fought and died every day, consistently find and eliminate her targets with such precision? But it wasn't just skill. Lyudmila had something else, an intuition for survival. She developed what would later be called her crazy trick, a method so unorthodox and audacious that it seemed almost reckless. Yet, it worked. Every decision she made was calculated, designed to give her the advantage and keep her alive in situations that would have killed almost anyone else. She learned to turn fear into a tool, using the enemy's own arrogance and assumptions against them. While most soldiers relied on brute force, Lyudmila relied on brains, patience, and the element of surprise. Her missions became legendary. She would hide for hours, sometimes days, waiting for a single opportunity, and when it came, she struck with a precision that made the enemy question whether they were being hunted by a person or a ghost. The winter forests became her domain, her mind reading the terrain as if she had built it herself. She could calculate trajectories, anticipate movements, and vanish without a trace before anyone even realized she had been there. Even her comrades were in awe. Soldiers who had fought for years described her as untouchable, as if fate itself protected her. But Lyudmila was not invincible. She knew the risks, and every kill carried weight. Each shot was not just about eliminating the enemy, it was about survival, about the relentless drive to defend her country and her people. In the chaos of war, that clarity of purpose was what made her extraordinary. As months passed, her reputation grew. She was no longer just another soldier in a uniform, she was a symbol, a living testament to the power of courage, intelligence, and sheer determination. And yet, despite the growing legend, Lyudmila remained humble, never boasting, never letting fame distract her from the mission. She moved quietly, deliberately, knowing that the forest and the battlefield alike demanded respect and caution. What would come next, though, would test everything she had learned. The winter would grow harsher, the battles bloodier, and the enemy more desperate. And it was during this time that she would unleash the full extent of her crazy trick, a method that would confound the enemy and secure her place in history as one of the deadliest snipers of all time. The stage was set. The forests were silent but deadly, and in the midst of it all, one woman alone, patient and precise, was about to change the face of war in ways no one had expected. The forest seemed endless, a maze of white and grey, but Lyudmila knew it like the back of her hand. Every tree, every mound of snow, every faint trail of footprints told a story if you knew how to read it, and she did. She had spent countless hours observing, learning, and waiting. While other soldiers rushed into combat, she moved with patience that seemed almost unnatural, as if time itself slowed when she was stalking her prey. Her crazy trick wasn't something taught in the army manuals. It wasn't a standard tactic or a well-worn strategy. It was her own creation, born from necessity and sharpened by experience. She realized early on that to survive, she needed to think like the enemy, to anticipate what they expected, and then do the exact opposite. Where most snipers hid, she sometimes exposed herself, but in ways that made the Germans believe she was vulnerable. They would think, for a moment, that she had made a mistake, and that moment, that tiny hesitation, was all she needed. It was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. She would carefully position herself in plain sight, in locations that seemed illogical, almost reckless. The enemy would advance, believing they had the upper hand. Then, when they were within range, she would strike with deadly precision, one shot, and disappear before anyone could even identify where it came from. The trick relied on patience, nerve, and an absolute mastery of timing. It was risky, but she calculated every move with the cold accuracy of a machine, though nothing about her was mechanical. She was alive, fully aware of the dangers, and yet she danced with death in a way that no one else dared. Over the next months, her reputation spread across the front. Soldiers whispered stories of the woman sniper who could strike without warning, who seemed to vanish into the forest like smoke. Some Germans began to panic at the mere sight of a single figure among the trees. Reports came back that entire patrols were being taken down, one, by a sniper they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't stop. Lyudmila had become a force of nature, a ghost that haunted the enemy in every snow-covered forest, in every quiet village street, in every line of sight that should have been safe. Her methods were ruthless, but always calculated. She studied her targets meticulously, learning their routines, noticing even the smallest patterns. A soldier who paused too long by a frozen stream, a group marching too closely together, a lookout who failed to scan properly, any of these mistakes could become a fatal opportunity. Lyudmila didn't just wait for luck, she created it. She understood the psychology of fear, how a sudden death could throw an entire squad into chaos, how hesitation could turn into vulnerability, and she exploited it, again and again. Yet she was not immune to danger. Each mission carried the risk of exposure, of capture, or of being outnumbered. She was often alone, relying on her instincts and her rifle, but she moved with a quiet confidence, trusting in her preparation, her observations, and the intimate knowledge she had of the terrain. Every kill was a battle of wits, every encounter a test of nerve, and through it all, she remained astonishingly composed. What set her apart from other snipers was not just her skill, but her relentless drive. She didn't stop after a few kills, didn't settle into complacency. She tracked her successes meticulously, learning from every encounter, refining her tactics, and pushing herself to ever greater precision. In just 11 months, she accumulated a staggering total, 309 confirmed kills. Each one was not just a number, but a story of survival, a testament to her audacity, patience, and cunning. Along the way, she inspired those around her. Comrades marveled at her fearlessness and ingenuity. Soldiers who had once doubted a woman's ability to fight alongside them now saw her as a symbol of courage and skill. Officers praised her discipline and precision, recognizing that she was changing the very rules of sniper warfare. And yet, despite the acclaim and awe, Lyudmila remained focused on her mission. Recognition mattered little compared to survival and victory. Her life in the field was grueling, filled with long hours of waiting, extreme cold, and the constant awareness that a single misstep could mean death. But she thrived in this environment. The forest, The snow and the shadows were not obstacles, they were her allies. She learned to read the wind, the light, and even the subtle sounds that others ignored. Every small detail became a weapon in her hands. And then there were the stories, the ones that soldiers told in hushed tones, almost as if speaking them aloud could summon her presence. Tales of her disappearing into the forest before reinforcements could arrive, of sniper duels where she emerged victorious without ever being detected, of German officers growing increasingly paranoid as their units suffered inexplicable losses. She became more than a soldier. She became a legend. Yet behind the legend was a woman who understood fear, loneliness, and the heavy weight of responsibility. Every life she took was a decision she had to live with, and every mission carried the risk of being the last. She wrote letters home, sometimes to friends, sometimes to family, describing the endless snow, the silence before gunfire, the lives lost in a conflict she could neither escape nor ignore. These letters revealed a human side, a person who felt, who worried, who endured, and who fought not for glory, but because it was necessary. By the time 11 months had passed, Lyudmila Pavlichenko had not only changed the game of sniper warfare, she had become a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. The enemy knew her name, whispered it with dread. Her comrades saw her as a beacon of courage. And the world would soon come to recognize the remarkable woman who had, against all odds, turned patience, skill, and a crazy trick into an unstoppable force. The winter was relentless, and so was Lyudmila. Every morning she emerged from the forest like a shadow, carrying her rifle and a determination that seemed unshakable. By now, the German soldiers had begun to fear her almost as much as the cold or the land itself. Entire patrols would halt, hesitant to move, unsure where the next shot would come from, and she used that fear like a weapon, bending it to her will. It was during one particularly brutal stretch of the war that her crazy trick reached its most daring expression. She had learned to play with the enemy's expectations, to manipulate them into exposing themselves. On one mission, she positioned herself in what appeared to be an exposed clearing, where any sniper would have been a target. She waited for hours, visible to the trained eye, and sure enough, a group of German soldiers advanced, confident that they had spotted an easy kill. Then she struck. One precise shot after another, each fired with calm focus, and the enemy fell. But what followed was even more remarkable. She vanished before anyone could pinpoint her location, melting into the forest, as if the trees themselves had swallowed her. That single encounter became the blueprint for dozens more, each one more audacious than the last. Her reputation soared, not just for the sheer number of enemy soldiers she eliminated, but for the ingenuity, audacity, and near mystical timing she displayed in every engagement. Yet, for all the stories and legends, Lyudmila remained deeply human. She knew the cost of war, the lives extinguished, and the fragile line between survival and death. There were nights when the weight of it pressed on her, when the forest seemed unbearably silent, haunted by the echoes of those she had fought against. And yet, even in those moments, she pressed forward, driven by duty, patriotism, and a fierce, unyielding will. Her fame eventually crossed borders. Reports of her exploits reached not only the Soviet High Command, but also distant Allied leaders. She was invited to travel abroad, to meet with figures who wanted to understand how one sniper could achieve what most armies could not. And she travelled with the same quiet dignity she had shown in battle, never boasting, never exaggerating, simply recounting her experiences and emphasizing the relentless focus, patience, and preparation behind every success. But it was not the accolades or the attention that defined her legacy. It was the impact she had on the battlefield, on the soldiers who witnessed her courage, and on the very nature of warfare itself. Her tactics, her methods, and her remarkable ability to turn adversity into advantage changed the way snipers were trained, the way armies thought about stealth and observation, and the way fear could be harnessed as a tool. Even after the war, her story continued to inspire. She returned home a hero, but she never forgot the lessons of the forests, the snow, and the frozen silence of the battlefield. She spoke of resilience, of patience, and of the importance of staying calm in moments when others might panic. And the world remembered her, not just for the 309 enemy soldiers she eliminated, but for the courage, ingenuity, and indomitable spirit that had allowed a single woman to change the course of countless battles. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's name became more than a historical fact. It became a symbol, a reminder that extraordinary courage can take many forms, that intellect and audacity are as deadly as any weapon, and that one person, armed with skill, ingenuity, and determination, can leave a mark that echoes long after the guns have fallen silent. The forests where she once hunted are quiet now, the snow eventually melting into spring, but the story of the woman who turned patience into power and strategy into survival lives on. Every sniper who studies her methods, every soldier who learns from her courage, carries forward a fragment of that remarkable legacy. And in the end, that is what makes her story unforgettable. Not the number of enemy soldiers defeated, not the fame she achieved, but the sheer audacity of a woman who refused to be underestimated, who turned fear into her ally, and who proved that courage, cunning, and relentless focus could redefine what was possible on the battlefield. The legend of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the female sniper with a crazy trick that seemed impossible, is a story that will echo through history. It is a story of resilience, precision, and the extraordinary power of one person to shape the world around them, even in the darkest hours of war.